everybody. Thank you all so much for coming to this really quick NaNoWriMo themed live stream. As you can see, I'm not in my usual filming studio. I am reporting to you from a cabin in the woods where my video quality is not very good. My audio quality is not very good also. But I just figured I would hop on here in case any of you are working on projects for NaNoWriMo and have any questions at all about character development, about plotting, about pacing, about fast drafting. Maybe you're feeling a little bit discouraged about your draft. I usually am around this time when I'm doing stuff for Nano, so I just figured I would come on here and see if any of you had any questions. And if you do, I will answer them. If you don't, then I don't have to be here. So I think I'm just gonna hang out for a little while. If you have a question about your Nano project, feel free to ask me and I'm very happy to chat about it. If you want to give me details about it, like tell me a little bit about your story and your characters, we can go really in depth because I'm here as a resource in case any of you want any help. But if any of you don't know me, my name is Claire Fraze, and I am a young adult author who is also on YouTube, who makes videos sharing things that I learned about writing that helped me improve as a writer. So if you like craft tips, make sure to subscribe. And if you find this video helpful, also make sure to like it. So, okay, we already have some people who have joined us. Hi, Ivory Roses. I'm so glad that you could make it. Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Cool Gamer. Thank you also for coming. I'm so glad to see you guys here. Ivory Roses says, I joined late to Camp Nano because of school. Very fair. I used to really struggle drafting for Nano while also in school. It's really hard to manage both of them. Hi, Madeline. Thank you so much for coming and joining. Madeline asks, have you ever used Novel Factory? No, I haven't. I don't know what that is. What is Novel Factory? Is it a software or a writing program? And I'm so glad. This is your opportunity. I'm literally here to answer questions today. So please hit me with questions. Otherwise, I'll be just sitting here awkwardly drinking my lukewarm tea. It's very cold outside. Ivory Roses. Ivory Roses just published one of their books. That's so exciting. Congratulations. That's awesome. And I'm so glad that you found my videos helpful. Send a link to your published book in the comments. I'm sure everybody here would love to go check it out and support you. I would love to see your published book. That's so exciting. I'm so happy for you. And Madeline said they'll send me the link. Awesome. I'm excited to check it out. People ask me a lot about different writing softwares and things that I enjoy writing with, but I'm pretty set in my ways as far as different programs I like to use to write. But I'm always open. Like I always find it very fun going and looking at programs that other people like. I haven't found a program yet that is able to really replace Scrivener. I've heard that Living Writer is amazing. And I also don't use Scrivener when I am doing anything except for drafting. If I'm drafting the first draft of the book, I'll use Scrivener, but everything after that is always in Word just because of track changes. And I found that that's the easiest when working with editors and other people and beta readers. People can leave track comments in Word. BB Gunn asked, I see recommendations for Elements of Style. What is the best grammar book for writing fiction? I do like Elements of Style. I can't think of a book off the top of my head that I love for grammar. I've read Elements of Style. I haven't read a lot of other grammar books. I focus more on reading young adult books and just naturally having written for a long time and know like the grammar that I learned in high school and college carrying me through. I haven't done a lot of thinking about grammar and relearning grammar. But there is an author who I've interviewed on the channel before. His name is Maxwell Alexander Drake, and he is writing and coming out with a book, I think in February, called The Holy Book of Grammar, which I am definitely going to pick up because I actually think it sounds really interesting. And that's coming from someone that doesn't typically read grammar books, because he goes through different parts of grammar and explains how they apply to fiction writing. So I think that would be a helpful book once that comes out. It's not out yet. But I would definitely start with the Elements of Style. I'm sorry, I'm not probably the best person to ask this question to, but I think that Elements of Style is definitely the place to start because that's one I've actually read. Ivy Rose has asked, how do you make suspense to build in your stories and add character building, like one character with two different personalities? Also, how do you make it not confusing? Suspense is a very difficult thing. I have often felt or fell prey to making my books too confusing because I tend to add too many things to them and I get overexcited. Um, I think so. You have multiple parts in this question. So I'll start with the suspense part. I would say suspense is typically suspense can correlate to conflict getting more intense in your book. Like if you're writing a book about a serial killer, obviously a serial killer is pretty scary, but maybe at the beginning of the book the serial killer is not directly threatening your main character. And as they progress and start learning more about the mystery and they start getting deeper into the mystery, the serial killer starts to maybe target them. And so as they progressively learn more, they may learn more that gets somebody's attention and makes the serial killer start to want to kill them, or maybe they're the next victim. And as they learn more, they're more in, like, they're in deeper in this mystery plot. And so I think that the way that you build suspense, this is just me riffing on all these questions. Obviously, I'm getting all these questions as you're asking them. But the way that I go about writing suspense is by making sure that every single scene in my book has a definitive conflict. So every single scene has a character who wants something, every single scene has something standing in their way and has some sort of fight or tension that happens inside the scene. And I also have certain things that I draw out over the course of the book that maybe aren't resolved at the end of every chapter. And I also increase the stakes as the books go on. So as the character is moving through the plot, if they lose and if the villain defeats them, it's going to be way worse than it was before. So this is like going back to the serial killer thing. Like, maybe if they give up looking for the mystery in chapter, or trying to solve the mystery in chapter 3, they're not actually going to be in critical danger. But if they stop trying to solve the mystery in chapter 24, it might be too late because people are trying to find them or people are trying to hurt them. So that's how I would approach suspense. I personally love sticky notes. I write everything out in sticky notes and I would break down what my major conflict is and write it into a bunch of different little scary things that can happen as the character gets deeper into the mystery. So that's how I approach suspense. But suspense is also a very vague concept. I would probably have to sit down and really try to think about how to phrase my thoughts on suspense if I were filming a YouTube video. But I think suspense has to do with conflict and it has to do with stakes. And if your character is in danger, there is going to be more suspense. And if your readers don't know everything, that's going to be another thing that holds them in suspense because they're going to want to find out the answer. So if you keep opening up different questions while also answering questions, like you don't want just a million open questions, but if you are smart about which questions you leave open that make the readers want to keep reading, that's another way that you can have that suspenseful feeling and make people want to continue reading your book. So that's probably how I would build suspense, and think of it as building it in tiers. So you start with one kind of dangerous thing and then a more dangerous thing and then a really dangerous thing, and think of it kind of as an arc that ramps up like that. But just try to think of it in terms of stakes. And then character building. I don't exactly I can't offer you specific advice about your character with two different personalities. Maybe if you could give me a little bit more background in the comments, then I can give you some more specific feedback. I think that you might be talking about, actually, I don't know. Give me some details in the comments because I don't want to assume. Do you mean like having like a split personality? Like one time they believe that they're one person and what time like they believe that they're a different person? Or yeah, give some more context and then I'd be able to answer that better. All right, Madeline asked, I've always had so much trouble with outlining and the structure of novels. I think in scenes and characters and bringing that all together bursts my brain a bit. Do you have anything that can help? I totally feel you. Just out of curiosity, are you a plotter or a pantser? Because that will dictate what I tell you. I'm a plotter and I love outlining my books, and I find it really hard to write if I don't have an outline. But I also know a lot of writers that as soon as they create an outline, their excitement for drafting goes away. So if you are a pantser, you might not want to outline as much or overthink everything right away. Um, I think that maybe if outlining things and scenes might feel overwhelming, try to outline a little bit less and just isolate the most important plot points of your story. So, the first 5 plot points that I always outline when I'm starting to write are my point of entry, my inciting incident, my midpoint, my climax, and my resolution. And then everything else comes in between those 5 things. So the point of entry is like the very first scene in your story when you meet your main characters. You have to decide how you are going, or like how you want to introduce them to your readers. And I always like, I'm a big believer that the point of entry says a lot about who your characters are. So, like in the Hunger Games, in the first scene, Katniss has to go out hunting and she wakes up in the bed with her sister. So, those two important parts of her character and kind of shows that she's a provider and she loves her sister and that she's skilled with a bow and arrow, all of which are things that come into the story later on. And then your inciting incident is when your conflict really starts. So, every story has a character who wants something. I know I say this all the time on my channel. I sound like a broken record, but every story has a character who wants something, something that's standing in their way, and then some sort of conflict as they try to get what they want, and that thing tries to keep them from getting what they want. So your inciting incident is when that conflict is first set up. So maybe when your hero first brushes against the antagonist, or when they discover that they have to go on a quest. It's the same as like the call to adventure in a traditional hero's journey. And then your midpoint is the point in the story where everything kind of flips on its head. Either they come up with a crazy clue in a mystery, or they realize something, or the stakes are dramatically shifted, or something really, really terrible happens and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to save the day and they have to completely change their strategy. That is another critical point that I like to know because it helps me separate the part 1 of my story from the part 2. Then the climax obviously is the big battle scene, or like really when the climax comes to a head at the end. And then the resolution is how everything settles at the end of the book. So if you are a pantser, I would probably suggest trying to start with those 5 things. And then maybe even just drafting based on those 5 things, because you always kind of know where you're going and you know what your conflict is. Like if you know what your inciting incident is and you know what your midpoint is, you can kind of try to explore your way and see all the different ways that you can get to your midpoint from your inciting incident and see if that helps, because then you don't have to overthink as much. I feel like a lot of writers who hear people say, like, you have to outline or you have to know exactly where you're going, might feel overwhelmed by just how much they have to know before they start writing. And they may feel like they don't, like, there's just too much to figure out that they can't start writing, and it might be paralyzing. So I would suggest maybe stepping back from that and just focusing on what you really, really need to know, and then working out all the rest of the scenes as you are revising. But oh, Madeline says a bit of both, unfortunately. I plot to keep it as an actual story, otherwise it's a blur of crazy and random. Yeah, I totally feel that. I am the same way. I lean a little bit more towards plotter, but I find that if I don't have at least a little bit of room to explore, I get bored. So maybe try to experiment with outlining less and see how you feel. And maybe the only way that you're going to figure out how much outlining you need is just by experimenting. So if you have been outlining a lot, maybe step away from it and just focus on pantsing and seeing how that feels. And if you feel overwhelmed, like you feel like it's a little bit too crazy, then you can go back and outline a couple of scenes. Another thing I like to do is know a couple of plot points and then just have bullet points of things that need to happen in order for them to get from point A to point B, or just brainstorm all the crazy things that can happen in between point A and point B. And I don't usually use all of those scenes, but I'll use some of them. And then if I'm stuck, that might be a cool way to bring in like a random idea that moves me closer to the midpoint. But this is also just a drafting strategy. Once you're in revision, I would definitely suggest focusing on an outline and figuring out how to rewrite things and restructure things. But if you are drafting, that would be what I suggest. And oh, Madeline also says, I think I try to write very character-driven stories to where it can be difficult to ask myself the tough but should be simple questions. Yeah, I love character-driven stories. The one I'm working on right now, I have 4 main characters, and I got so invested in each one of their arcs in the story that I created completely separate, like, heroes' journeys for each of the 4 characters, and now all of them are going off on these crazy side adventures. I'm, like, in revisions, trying to figure out ways to, like, pull them all together and, like, reunite them at different parts of the story so I can remind people that they're not all just going on side quests, but yeah, character arcs are important, and understanding what your characters are doing is very important. I'm not trying to say don't outline, but it's all a balance, and every writer is different. So thank you. This is kind of what I'm doing. That's what my channel is. It's just, yeah, this is what we're doing. Um, how do you know when to stop? I always feel like there is something more to write. By the way, it's so early in India. Oh yeah, time difference. It is not as early in the US where I am filming this. But how do you know when to stop? Well, I typically like to know the ending of my story before I start writing it because I have an idea of my conflict. I typically have an idea of how my conflict comes to a head. So, like, if I'm writing an adventure that's a quest and I have a character who needs to go and find an ancient artifact in an ancient tunnel system and has to fight a bunch of snakes and everything, and then you have this like bad guy that wants the ancient artifact all for themselves and has an evil plan to turn everybody into a lizard or something, and like that's the conflict of the story. Like, your hero has to battle the lizard guy and steal the artifact from the tunnels. The climax of the story is going to be when your hero is in the tunnels fighting all the snakes, and maybe the guy has already turned everyone into a lizard, so the hero has to find the magic antidote and turn everyone back into a human and also get the magic artifact and save the day. Once the hero has saved the day, I would say that your story is pretty much over, because if that's the main conflict that you've been exploring, once they've already had that major battle, you don't need to keep going as long. You can just kind of say, they have the ancient artifact and they lived happily ever after, and then that's the ending of your story. So if you always feel like there's something more to write, that might be a sign that you don't really know what your story is about yet, and you don't really know what your conflict is. So I would challenge you to really look at your story with an analytical eye and figure out who your main character is, what they want, what your major theme is, and how your character is trying to achieve their goal. And then see if you can figure out how to end your story from there, if that makes any sense. Because I do believe that if you don't know where to end your story, you probably don't know exactly where your story, like what your story is really about. So that would be what I suggest for that. I'm so glad that this advice is helping. This is fun. I have to rehydrate. I feel I've been talking nonstop for 18 minutes. Sorry about this. James says, I was just outlining when I took a break, and here you are. Yes, here I am. Hello, James. Thank you for popping in and saying hello. I hope outlining is going well. Ivy Rosa says, I agree. You should start a class. Your advice is life-saving. Thank you so much. You guys are so kind. I'm very grateful. Thank you all so much for being here and listening to me ramble. BB Gun said, I agree that internal editor needs to be turned off for first draft, but many times I just get trash that's unusable. How do I manage fast writing to still get worthwhile while writing? I can revise later. This is me. I struggle with this so much all the time. It's very difficult. I don't have a magic answer for you because I do struggle with it. I can tell you what I do to try to make it better. As a plotter, I do try to outline in advance. I do try to think about my story as I'm going and also know when to stop my first drafts. I think this is actually huge. In the book that I'm writing right now, I stopped my very first draft right before the climax at 75,000 words because I realized that all the different things that I'd set up were just all over the place and kind of trash and unusable because I didn't really know what my story was yet. And then I just looked at what I'd already written and then pulled it all together and then figured out how to restructure it into something that worked. And then I wrote my second draft and I got to the same place right before the climax, or actually, no, I only got to the midpoint and it was 90,000 words long because I beefed it up and made it crazy and it went to all sorts of different places. And then I knew that the midpoint wasn't going to make sense anymore the way that I'd originally imagined it, because I had a new idea in the third scene that kind of changed the stakes and changed the course of the story. So I went back to the drawing board and I figured it out. And now I am 80,000 words in and past the midpoint, or way past the midpoint. So I think the book is going to be between 120 and 130,000 words. It's going to be long. But because I knew when to stop, I didn't get too much trash. Like, I still got plenty of trash in the first half of the book, but I didn't waste as much time as I would have if I'd forced myself to finish each one of those drafts. So I think that that's a big part of it. If I hadn't done all of that exploring, I wouldn't have known all the different places that I could take the book in when I actually continued writing it. So that would be one big thing, is know when to stop. You don't have to finish every single first draft. If you feel in your gut that it's really bad, you can listen to your gut. I think it's important. I'm still working on this, learning what is the gut feeling that it's bad and what is feeling icky because your perfectionism is telling you that it could be better. And this is something, as I said, I still struggle with this and I'm working on it, but I've realized recently that this, I think, is the secret to figuring off how to turn off your internal editor, because sometimes your internal editor is useful and it'll save you time if it tells you actually the rest of this is going to be really, really bad, but you still want to do the exploring that is bad but can be turned into good stuff later. Because I'm still using material from my first draft in my final draft. I just have it in a completely separate context and with a bunch of other stuff around it. So that's definitely helpful. I would also probably, spend time on your outline and then also set daily word count goals. That helps me push through all of that uncertainty. Having a deadline right now, on a really strict deadline, and I'm going to have to work my tail off this month to get all of the chapters written. Because I wrote all of these drafts of the book up until like kind of the midpoint or up to the climax, the very ending section of the book has never been written before. I know exactly what's going to happen now because I've set everything up and I feel really confident and my outline is very thorough and I'm excited about it, but I haven't written them yet and I have to write them before the end of the month because I have to send the arcs to the printer and everything, and I have to work on it with my editor. So I have been having that pressure of a deadline and then also having the daily word count goals and the daily chapter goals is helping me push through the initial really bad drafts of these chapters that I clean up all the prose in, I work with my editor on and everything. So it's a bunch of things, but to summarize all that rambling, knowing when to stop, daily word count goals, outlining if you are a plotter, and having a deadline for yourself, which is honestly why Nano is really helpful, is having that community and, deadline to have it done by November. So, all right, let's see more questions. Oh, Ivory Roses says I have to go eat dinner, but this is really helpful. I'm so glad that you came. Thank you so much, Ivory Roses. I hope you have a fantastic dinner. And Madeline asked, do you schedule one-on-ones? You are my favorite person to learn about novel writing from. Well, thank you so much, Madeline. I actually do schedule one-on-ones. I do some coaching. I stopped coaching for a little bit just because I was so flat out with this current book that I'm writing. But once this book is published, like in the spring, I will have time to start doing some coaching again. So if you are interested in doing one-on-ones and having me read your pages and chatting about novels, you can email me at clairephrasebooks@gmail.com. My email is in the description of this video. Please do. That would be really fun. I really enjoy coaching and I love getting to read people's pages and dive deep into their stories, and it's very fun. James said, I have 5 separate stories merging into the adventure. Yes, very cool. As I said in my big long rambling thing that I just did, I have those like 4 separate, like all of my 4 main narrators have their own major theme and have their own major conflict, and they're all related to each other, but they're all slightly different. So some beta reader feedback I've had was that they just feel a little bit too disjointed in parts, that I have to kind of make sure that they're all pulled together and grounded around the main mystery at different parts in the story. So I'm literally currently working on that, not while I'm talking to you in this live stream, but right after I'm done, I will go back to working on that. Oh, we got a new question. Is it Netek? I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Hi, Claire. I'm writing a story where the narrator is going mad, or at least thinks he is. So he makes one recording a day, and then the next day takes place. In the ninth day, he is nearly killed by a monster. When he makes the recording, he is still in shock. How do you think I should show his fear, even though the event is already solved? Okay, I'm going to read that one more time to myself before answering this, so I make sure that I have the details right. So he records something every day, and then the next day his recordings come true. So is he more afraid when he's making the recording? Wait. So hold on, does he just quickly let me know, does he make the recording before the event echoing the recording takes place? Or does the event take place and then he records it? Um, Either, I mean, I actually, I guess I can answer that without knowing the difference. Um, so I think that the hold on, so correct me if I'm wrong, but is the character going to experience this in the present moment when they're either like the day before they're going to experience this firsthand and then have to relive it in the recording? Because if they relive it in the recording, then they you might just want to focus on showing the fear in the first scene. Um, could you just, yeah, give me a tiny bit more clarity on this before I answer it? Because I want to make sure that I don't just ramble about something I don't completely understand. Um, in general, I think showing versus telling emotions is hard. What I really focus on doing in my books is focusing on how emotions affect the body. So like, when you feel fear, you sweat, you like your senses are a little bit more vivid, you pay attention to a lot of things around you. I also really like showing emotions through objects. Like if you're in the first person point of view of a character and they're describing something, or like, maybe they're in shock and they hyper focus on a particular object, or they hyper focus on something and then they just describe that object in detail. And then based on the way that they're describing the object, or based on what they're focusing on in the scene, you get to understand what they're feeling around that. So I think, yeah, let's put a pin in this. Give me a little bit more context about when the recordings happen versus when the character experiences it in real time and which order they happen in, just because I'm still a little tiny bit confused. But it sounds like a very interesting story. Oh, thank you so much, James, for the super stickers. Thank you. It's very kind of you. Thank you. That's really awesome. I'm very, very grateful for when you guys send me super stickers. Makes me happy. I can buy better tea than the tea that I'm currently drinking because the kettle, it's like, I think it was -11 today. It was really, really freezing. I think it was like 2 degrees and then -11 with wind chill or something horrible. So even though my tea was a little lukewarm because I didn't have enough time right before starting this live stream to finish heating up my water all the way, and it has since cooled down because it is pretty cold in here too. So it's very snowy. Is it snowy where all of you are? Probably not in India. Maybe. I don't know. It's really snowy here. If anybody has any questions, or if Netek wants to give a little bit more context about their story, I am all ears. I always feel like my voice gets really hoarse halfway through doing these. I'm not used to talking this long without having any breaks. If I batch film YouTube videos, if I film like 4 in a day, I have to have like throat coat tea because otherwise I just talk so long. um, oh, I'm writing the question in more detail. Yay! Okay, yeah, no, take your time. I'm hanging out. I got time. But What is everybody working on for Nano? Is everybody working on a story for Nano? Let me know in the comments. I am kind of working on a story for Nano. I just have my deadline at the end of the month, so this story is my story for Nano. I was starting to feel pretty cocky, and I thought that maybe I could fast draft a second story along with the third book in the series, but I literally have never written the climactic chapters in like the second half of this story. I'm writing all of them for the very first time now, so I really need to focus on that. And I'm also going to a conference next week. So if any of you are going to the 20 Books to 50K conference, I will be there, and I'm very excited about it. So that will be very fun. I'm going to have to figure out ways to write very early or stay up late working on these chapters so I can keep pace and do one every day so I can get this done, because this is it's a lot of work when you have to finish a book. It's like I haven't published a book since April, and I wish I could be one of those authors that publishes books faster, but it just always takes me longer because I don't feel like I hate publishing things that I don't feel confident about, because I never want to sell something that I'm not super proud of. Like, this is what I created. Like, I want it to, I'd feel guilty if I was like, here's what I created. I'm so sorry. Give me your money, So I wish I could write faster, but I can't. Oh, okay, more questions. Laya says, I'm working on a sci-fi novel. Very cool. I could never do sci-fi. I don't know enough about tech. That's very impressive. I don't know enough about science. I keep really wanting to write like a scientific ghost book, kind of more a la Ghostbusters, but like creepier, about kind of ghost hunters and like, having more like determining a different type of energy that's like ghost energy, and like kind of digging into the science of that and creating a scientific system. But I was so bad at science in school. I have not been able to figure out a way to create that system in a way that I'm actually happy with it yet. So still working on it. James asked, what safely is a person who has conflict, like life's conflict? What exactly is a person in conflict? So when I'm talking about conflict in a story, all I mean is your character has a goal and that there's something that is preventing them from reaching that goal. Or like, in your traditional hero versus villain, like Beowulf story, you have a hero who wants to defeat a monster, and then you have a monster who doesn't want to be defeated. And so the conflict is the hero trying to defeat the monster while the monster is trying to defeat the hero, and the two of them are fighting. So the same, I mean, that's just the basic concept of conflict. And conflict can be anything. You can have internal conflict. You can have a conflict of somebody who really wants to be in a relationship and that's their goal, but the thing that's standing in their way is their fear that they're not good enough, for their childhood trauma, or there's something that is battling that, and then that's their conflict. I think there are a ton of different conflicts in life, and there are a ton of different conflicts in stories. And I think that every single story has to have a conflict. Otherwise, it is not a very interesting story. BB Gun said, thanks, your answer helped a lot. One thing, though, about the writing being unusable, I also mean that the sentences are vomited out and the writing quality sucks. I'm wondering where the line is. I firmly believe that you can really take any prose and turn it into something usable. I think you need to know how to self-edit your books, and I'm still working on learning that. I have editors that I work with. I have an editor who goes through my prose and like makes it readable and is like, this sentence is too sticky. This sentence makes no sense. You contradicted yourself in this sentence. I would cut this thing out, and then that really helps. I also use a software called Pro Writing Aid. Pro Writing Aid is great, and it highlights all different places that I've said my stomach clenches like 17 times in the same chapter. It will highlight all those so I can go in and change those. I also feel like when I read it out loud, I can see how stupid it sounds and then start editing it from there. But I 100% of the time always find it easier to edit something into sounding good when I already have a terrible like vomit prose chapter than if I'm just staring at a blank page, because at least I know what the story is and at least my characters are doing what they need to be. And I can change all the dialogue. I can make it sound like real people talking. I can do all of that later, but I at least know what the story is. I don't think about prose until every single plot thing in my story has already been ironed out. So that is what I would recommend. Beta readers also really help. There's a book that I love. It's called Self-Editing for Fiction Authors. I have it in my backpack, but it's all the way over there, so I'm not going to grab it. I forget who the author's name is, but it's really, really helpful. Their chapter on show versus tell is so good. They have great chapters on dialogue. Like, I would read books like that over and over again and just practice. And with time, you'll be able to clean it up. So yeah, I definitely would personally, that works better for me than trying to sound really good afterwards. If I sit and stare at some vomited prose and I do multiple passes of edits, like I read it out loud and then I run it through Pro Writing Aid, and then I make sure all the dialogue sounds like real dialogue, and then I make sure that all the emotions are not told, they're shown, and then I make sure that all the places look like they're kind of well described so you can feel like you can see the places, or if there are contradictory sentences, or if there too many sentences start with subjects, or like I do multiple passes. And then at the end, it's passable, and then I can send it to my editor. He can make it sound nice, and then afterwards, I'll do, my final couple of read-throughs, and it'll be better. So I prefer that and having a completed story than getting bogged down in my perfectionism and worrying too much about my prose at the beginning, because my goal for myself is just to get better every single book I write. It's not to write the perfect novel, because if my goal was to write the perfect novel, I would never publish anything. So yeah, from one perfectionist to another, vomit out that prose and learn how to rewrite it into something that you're proud of and that you're happy with. Because once the story is there, the rest you can massage pretty easily. So I hope that helps. Anna said, I start my stories, but I can't continue because I feel like I hold myself back and I judge too much. Now I have about 10 stories with about 10 pages at 60 pages. How do I stay excited about what I'm writing? I am so familiar with this feeling. Where do I start? Because this is something that I also struggle with. And I think that the perfectionism part, that kind of bounces back to what I was just talking about. It's really, really hard when you're holding yourself up to the high standard of trying to write the perfect novel to actually bring yourself to write any novel at all. If I expected that much of my first drafts, especially, I would not be able to write anything because I would just always end up feeling so bad about myself. And then I would compare myself to all of these other authors who have written things that look so much better. And then even though they're probably super heavily edited, I still compare my crappy first draft with their super published novel and then feel really bad and lament that I can never do it. And like, that was me, and it still is me if I don't stay on top of my brain. Do you think that you're more of a plotter or a pantser? Because getting stuck kind of in the middle of stories is a symptom of plotters who outline too much and they get bored of their stories. And it's also a symptom of plotters who don't, or sorry, it's a symptom of pantsers who plot too much, and it's also a symptom of plotters who pants too much. Both of those people kind of end up not finishing what they're working on. So if you could, whoa, there's so many comments. You guys, thank you. If you could let me know whether you're a plotter or a pantser, because I think that if you do identify more as a plotter and you try to actually like outline more of where you're going, that might help guide you through your story. And then if you identify more as a pantser, try not to outline as much, and that might get you excited about what you're writing. But if your problem is perfectionism, there really isn't a magic cure to that. If there was, I'd be all over that. It's really just learning how to train your brain to forgive yourself for not being perfect right at the beginning, and to learn how to rewrite what you've written. I found that the more confident I am in my ability to rewrite what I've already written and turn it into something I like, the more I'm willing to let myself be bad at what I am doing at the beginning. So reading those kind of self-editing books and trusting that you will be able to do that, or that you can find people that will help you get there, whether that is a group of beta readers or a writing group or a critique group or a critique partner or an editor or anybody that can help kind of get your prose to where you want it to be. I think that if you surround yourself with people and you trust in yourself and those people, that you will be able to take your vomit prose, which is, how I always think about my prose in my first drafts, and turn it into something better. Then you will give yourself more permission to not judge yourself right at the beginning, if that makes sense. But I feel like this is the eternal question. We're all our own worst critics when it comes to writing. I 100% of the time am so convinced that my books are absolutely terrible until I get one piece of beta reader feedback and the beta reader says, "Oh, I loved it." And then I feel so much better about it. It's just if I'm left alone with my story and with my brain, I'm so hard on it. And then I need some external voices to kind of keep me on track and not let me go down this crazy spiral. But I feel like a lot of writers are like this too. You're in good company, Anna. All right, let's see. We have so many comments. I'm very honored. Thank you all so much for being so active in the comment section. I was a little nervous nobody was going to show up to this, so this is really fun. Oh, okay, cool. We got more context from Netek. The main character has been having visions, and his conclusion is that he's going mad. In reality, an entity is giving him visions of the future to make sure what he remembers is not made up. Okay, that makes so much more sense. Every day when he's back at his hotel room, he records what happened during that specific day. In the 9th day, he is investigating an abandoned mansion that served as a cult base, but a monster that was defending the place attacks him. Another monster, this one is friendly, saves him. After this event takes place, he goes back to the hotel and registers what happened, but he's still in shock that he was nearly killed. Okay, so with that context, I think that your story might get repetitive if you are experiencing if the readers are experiencing everything the main character is going through in real time during the visions, and then you repeat it again in the recordings. I think that just to avoid having the readers be like, "Oh, I've seen this before," like, "Oh, I'm reading kind of the same scene all over again," I'd maybe try to choose one to make really vivid and visceral, and then maybe gloss over the recordings of it. Like, maybe you have the first person account of the visions be like when he's really feeling the fear and he's really terrified. And then you can summarize the recording as like, and then I hit record, and then, you fade to black, and then you start the new vision or the new chapter. Because I don't think that you want to have the echoes of everything that already happened all the time, unless it's revealing new information about maybe who the entity is that's giving him visions of the future, or what the abandoned mansion was, or what the cult is. I also, the reason I might not know this is just because I don't know as much about your story as you do. But I would also think about what the purpose of the visions, or sorry, what the purpose of the recordings would be, and why you need your character to be recording all of the different things. And the reason behind the recordings might help, it would probably help you decide what information about the recordings is most important to include in your book, if that makes sense. Because if your character is just collecting evidence, and all the evidence at the end of the book is going to come back and kind of help him figure out who the entity is, then maybe you don't actually need to have him relive each vision. You can just have him kind of hit record at the end of the chapter and have it be like one little one-liner that he is recording just to remind readers that he is. And then at the end, you can show him coming to the conclusion. And then you have all the fear that he's feeling in the monster fight happen in the first vision, if that makes sense. And if that applies to your story based on my understanding. The visions are not clear, more like flashes, and he does not understand it well, so the events in the recordings the first time the readers experience it. Oh, okay. Okay, that makes sense. So then I go to the opposite of what I just said and keep the visions short and have him not really understand maybe all of the fear of fighting the monster. Maybe he sees these visions and he's like, "Oh no, that seems really scary. I hope that doesn't happen." But then when he's actually confronted with the monster in the recordings, that's when you get all of the showed fear. So it doesn't feel like you're repeating it twice. I also think it would be a different type of fear. Like if you got a premonition that something bad was going to happen, it would be more of a feeling of dread. And then if you were staring in the eyes of a really horrifying monster, that would be a feeling of utter terror. And if your character is in that scene with the monster, then you can show that in their body more than like them reeling from a vision that they just had. So I know your original question was about how to show the emotion in the scene. So I would definitely focus on how the emotion manifests in your character's body, and also keep your sentences snappy. I know that when I write fear, I try not to write really long descriptions of things because the character is just so terrified of everything that what they notice is just like little tiny bullet points of what's happening because their brain is so scrambled and scared. So I don't know if you're telling it in the first person, but also if it's third person limited, it doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure that you are choosing which details to include based on what your character would notice in the scene, and don't spend too much time on anything because your character is going to be so afraid and all they're probably going to be able to see is the giant monster in front of them that's trying to eat them. So yeah, I would definitely err on the side of keeping the visions short and a little bit vague, and then having the actual recordings be detailed so that you're not echoing each emotion twice. I hope that helps. It sounds like a really interesting story. That sounds really, really cool. I hope it's going well. um, all right, let's see more questions. Um, just scrolling. All right, Goatback R says, what is your opinion on killing off a character? Do you think it's okay to do it suddenly, or should it be strictly thematic? You know, I think that you need to have a reason to kill off your characters. I I know a lot of it depends on your story, it depends on your genre. I write young adult books. I don't like killing characters without having a reason for it. I also write horror, so I do need to kill off some characters just to make things scary and to remind people of the stakes of the thriller. I would not to kill off characters for absolutely no reason whatsoever, because then I think your readers are going to get mad, especially if it's a main character. Like if it's a character that people have really grown attached to and you kill them off for no reason in just a couple of sentences, I think your readers are going to feel really angry and like they were cheated of something. So I think be thoughtful. I think it's okay to do, absolutely. It's okay to do it suddenly because that's a lot of the times how it happens in life, but you can't gloss over it. And it has to be something that affects the story going forward. You can't just have a character die and then I hate that. This is going to sound really rich coming from me because I write young adult books about like necromancy and bringing ghosts back into people's dead bodies. But I really don't like it when you kill a character and then they immediately come back to life right after it for no real reason, because that kind of gets rid of the stakes. I think if you are going to kill off a character, you want it to be final and you want the ripple effect of that to really radiate through your book. Unless you're me and you're writing about ghosts coming back from the dead, because it's kind of like a justified story world. Like I kill off one of my main characters in book 1, but they are like it's a big deal in book 2, and while they are a ghost for some time, you know, they're still present in the story, and like it has ripple effects. So I think deaths are great to be thematic, but just make sure that you are intentional with them and you don't gloss over them. Because I know as a reader, when characters are just killed for no reason, it makes me so mad. Even though it's realistic, I still think that even if it is realistic and maybe you don't have a very strict plot reason to kill them off, the effects of their death have to ripple through the rest of the story. If that makes sense. I hope. Yeah, I think it does. BB Gun said, thank you for the advice on vomit writing. Sometimes I just feel like a girl who wants to be a ballet dancer and I keep hopping on one foot instead of learning to dance intentionally. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, well, join the club. I mean, everybody is doing their best to learn how to write. It's really only about learning how your brain works and what works best for you. So I hope that, you know, you are able to conquer your brain. I know I'm still working on it. It's a very tough battle. Let's see. Oh, Madeline said, some research that helped me with describing emotion was books by Paul Ekman. He wrote books on micro emotions, and I study a couple of his books, like my non-existent class needs an A on the final exam. That's I haven't actually read any of those books. I will write that down and go check that out. That's interesting. I also recommend the Emotion Thesaurus. This is something that I've had since I was like 13, and I love this book. It's amazing. It's so good. James asked, is the book Self-Editing for Fiction Writers, 2nd edition, How to Edit Yourself into Print? Yes, that's the one. Yep, that's it. I forgot the name, or I forgot the author's names, but that is the book. It's got like a blue accents on the cover, and it's like a lined paper page kind of on the front cover. It's so helpful. It's such a good book. Oh, Anna said, when I plan a lot, I get bored, but I need to know where I'm going. Okay, so you're kind of like a plantser. I think then at the beginning of this video, I actually kind of talked about this, how I always start with the same 5 plot points. So maybe if you want to rewind the video and watch that section, I would maybe start with those and then maybe start just writing around those 5 plot points, because then you'll know what your beginning is and what your midpoint is and where you're going, and then what your ending is. So you always know where you're going, but you get to explore along the way, and then you'll have a draft, and then you can think about it analytically and decide how you want to revise it and turn it the way that you want it to be after you've written it. So it takes a lot of experimentation. I thought I was a hardcore plotter until I wrote this book. My outline for this book was 20,000 words. It was so detailed. I knew everything that was going to happen. And then by chapter 4, I was just so bored, and I found it so hard to actually write it because I'd already felt like I'd completed a draft by writing this outline. So, and it also was really not work well done because I have deviated so far from what I originally thought would be in this book. So it takes a lot of experimentation. Let's see. Because it is so funny that you're nervous that you wouldn't have questions. I have so many, but I keep stopping myself because I want to leave time for others. Yes, please ask me questions. I will have to go at some point, probably within maybe the next 15 minutes. So I'll try to keep my answers brief because I do need to eat dinner. I'm getting a little hungry, but this was super awesome. So maybe I'll schedule another one of these. I might not be able to do one next week, but I could do one the week after, not on Thanksgiving, but on that week, because this is really fun. I really love chatting about all of these questions in real time. It's very fun for me. So yeah, keep the questions coming. And if you don't get your question answered in this one, which you probably will, I'm going to keep my answers brief and speed through, but come to the next one because I think I'm going to start doing this more. Let's see. Oh, I'm so glad that helped you. Yeah, your story sounds very, very interesting. James had to go. Thank you so much, James, for coming. Yes, I can absolutely put a link in the description for my book recommendations. That's a very good idea. I think we talked about the Emotion Thesaurus and self-editing in this video, but I definitely have other books that I really love. BB Gun said, I hate when stories bring a dead character back. That's one thing I loved about your books, that you had consequences for bringing people back. Yeah, I mean, my whole series is about bringing people back, and that is something that I'm trying to deal with right now, is like how to make death final when a lot of my characters get turned into ghosts, and ghosts are so present in the story. I need to figure out, I'm still figuring out ways to like actually, you know, when a ghost dies, or like what could happen to make that death feel really final. So as you know, if you've read my series, in book 2, I did a lot of playing around with consequences to bringing people back, and how it's not just like, you know, happy-go-lucky, you've got a new body. There are some issues that come along with it. So consequences are very important. I also hate it when stories bring dead characters back without any consequences. Oh, the Emotion Thesaurus. Yes, Emotion Thesaurus is amazing. Everybody should have an Emotion Thesaurus. I love my Emotion Thesaurus, especially when I'm fast drafting. Like a lot of what they'll do is they'll have an entry for every single emotion, and then they'll give you lists of ways that it'll manifest in your body. And not every single way it manifests in your body is particularly fitting to that one scene that you're writing, but it is helpful if you're trying to draft fast to just be able to say like, oh, my stomach dropped, and then move on, or like, oh, I got really sweaty suddenly, and then move on, because you can kind of mark what the emotion is and then keep going. Um, oh, Anna said it's my first time participating online, but I loved it and I'll be back. Yay! Definitely, please come back. I love doing these and I love getting to talk to everybody. And this is really fun. I feel like we're creating like an online community here. It's really cool. um, Robin asks, do you know a good way to introduce a character but without a big dramatic scene and keeping it interesting? Yes, I think this also really depends on which characters you are introducing. Not every single character needs to be introduced in a big scene. A lot of my characters are not introduced in big dramatic scenes. Most of my main characters are introduced with very specific moments. Like when you first meet my main character, she's like, consoling her crying brother. And like the big heart of my first book is her love for her younger brother. So I wanted everyone to meet her doing that. But like I have minor characters that will come in just because it's situational. Like a character arrives at work one day and their best friend from work is also there and like says hi and asks them how they're doing. And then that's not really a big dramatic scene. They're just introduced in passing as your character is entering the office, So I think I would spend more time introducing the characters who are very important in your story. Like your main characters, you want to be strategic about choosing the moment that first introduces them. Like my main character, Shiloh, is introduced consoling her brother. My main character, Francesca, is introduced when Shiloh sees her on the street and she kind of points and is like, that's the really weird girl from school, because she's an outcast and everyone in town thinks she's super creepy. And then my character, Miles, is introduced. He's in the newsroom. He has an anxious breakdown about something that Shiloh is telling him. So that shows that he's a school reporter. He's really smart. He's an AP student. He like is very analytical. And then my character Jonah is introduced being very grumpy and very protective over Miles and being super mean to Shiloh. And that's kind of the space where he starts the book because he's the rebellious bad boy character. So I chose all those moments because they added some color to who the characters are. And just from the very first line, readers knew who they were. But a lot of characters who don't matter that much in the story don't need that kind of strategic opening. So I have characters that just come in mid-conversation and then leave. I have characters chaperoning the school dance who are mentioned, and then, not a lot of time is spent on them. So I think prioritize the big characters and give them drawn out moments. And then your small characters, you don't have to worry too much about the big dramatic scenes and just weave them in when it feels right. Also, I would recommend you don't spend too much time on like long physical description with characters who are not super important in your story. I mean, just in general, physical description, keep it to a minimum, I think. Just like choose some very specific details that reflect something about their personality, but don't bog it down too much. So, and then, maybe one line for the other ones that aren't important. So that's what I would recommend. Oh, BB Gun said, please schedule another one. Last question. You said you were a natural show, not tell. Description is my nemesis. Were you always good at showing? No. I still have to do a lot of work with showing and telling. Especially when I'm fast drafting, it's a bad habit of mine. I will just tell emotions just to have the tag so I kind of can track how the characters are feeling. But it takes thought to figure out how to convey emotion. The way that I write now is very present and grounded in the character's right now state of mind. It's like, it's first person present. It's exactly what's happening to them in the moment. They can't reflect on anything that's happened to them in the past, which does get rid of a lot of natural telling because there's no storyteller. It's just like you get to see the eyes or the story through the eyes of the character. And it's my job as the author to like allow the book to be a little bit cinematic for the readers and not sound like it's being told to them. Something that really helped me actually was that switch into first person present. It helped guide me towards a more active writing voice, but a lot of it is still in rewrites. I have to go back and I'm like, okay, I tell this emotion, I tell this feeling. This is her explaining this. She doesn't need to explain this. Is there a way that I could convey this without her saying this or explaining this? So a lot of that happens in rewrites. And the best chapter of a book that I've ever read on show versus tell is in that self-editing for fiction authors book. I have a video coming out. I haven't edited it yet. I have been falling behind on my videos because of this deadline that I am on coming out about description and like how much description is too much description and how I typically balance description in my writing. So maybe that will be helpful, but definitely that book on self-editing. It's chapter 1 and it's such a good chapter on show versus tell. All right, so I think this is going to be my last question because I need to go. We've already been chatting for an hour and I need to go eat. But the last question, Nedek asked, the monster attack had the consequence that he contracted a disease that will kill him in 5 days. The story ends with him finding the cure to that, but I'm struggling to show that the character is dying. I would advise you trying to go a little deeper than like coughing up blood. I feel like every single time a character dies in fiction, they're always coughing up blood. I had to go through a very similar thing when I was writing book 2 of my series. I also had a character who was slowly dying, and I had to figure out exactly how that would impact his body. And so I did a lot of research on actual human body decomposition and the different stages of decomposition. I did a lot of research on withdrawal from drugs and like different types of drugs and how drug dependency can affect your body and how withdrawal symptoms can affect your body. So I think that you need, the monster attack it's a fictional monster. It's a fictional ailment. You have to fictionalize something that makes sense for you. And if it's a story that takes place over the 5 days, I would try to break it down into like every single day. It's a slightly different stage of deterioration, but you'll have to create a fictional cause of death or like system of death. But I would try to ground it in reality as much as you can and not just focus on coughing up blood. I had a lot of in mind, it was weird because he also like started taking this other kind of drug / medication to mediate the symptoms. And so he was also getting symptoms from that. So it was a little bit muddy. But actually learning about like body decomposition was super interesting. In my very first draft, I had him basically go through all the different stages of decomposition. And at the end, he was like turning different colors and all puffy. And like he couldn't really move his arms properly. And like I was just talking to this with my family and my dad was like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's so unrealistic. So I had to go and figure it out. He was like, anyone reading this is going to start laughing because like he's just this weird zombie-like person and it's not actually that scary or realistic. So yeah, that's my rambling, but try to ground it in real life as much as you can because I think that's what's going to make it affect readers a little bit more. Yeah, okay, cool. So, Sean said this was fun, would enjoy more of these. I hope everyone's books turn out great. I also hope everybody's books turn out great. I'm so happy that you had fun, Sean. I'm so happy that you all came. Thank you all so much for coming and hanging out with me this evening. I will definitely schedule another one of these. And if you are interested in coming to that one, just keep your eye out and, hit the little notification bell on the post when I schedule it. I hope you all have fantastic weeks. Your books all sound amazing. Good luck on your writing projects. I will see you soon. And as always, happy writing.